Hello, ladies and gentlemen and others who shall remain nameless. It's the beautiful Sydenham River in downtown Owen Sound. Well, actually, it's not quite so beautiful today, but hey, you know how it is. So I'm going to talk briefly about a phenomenon that I'm sure everybody has noticed, and that is the ever-increasing cruelty of the policies of modern conservatives. Conservatives don't seem to be terribly interested in conserving anything, so I'm not sure why they keep the name. But, yeah. The point is not to conserve. The point is to hurt. To hurt people. To find new and creative ways to hurt people who can't fight back. Modern conservative isn't even concerned with being selfish. He's concerned with being cruel. It's not selfishness anymore. It used to be selfishness, but now it's cruelty. It is senseless, pointless cruelty. What used to be a concern with God, a king, and country, and preserving the ancient way of life that made us who we are, namely monarchy and the petty nobility, and curses upon those newfangled liberal capitalists with their foolish notions of profit over tradition. And this archaic notion of conservatism was replaced by, well, old liberal capitalism, which became the new conservatives. As liberals increasingly realized that they had made a mistake, conservatives embraced that mistake wholeheartedly. For reasons that I still don't really completely understand. And so what we've seen is that conservatives have gone from traditional values of monarchy and nationalism to the new values of liberal, unrestricted capitalism as the road to human progress. And then in the last 40 years, they've abandoned unrestricted capitalism in favor of, well, just senseless cruelty. Just looking for new and novel ways to hurt people, just to hurt them. Even at the expense of costing money, which their capitalist predecessors would have actually been horrified by because, yeah. We've lost sight of the point where conservatives actually made sense. I mean, yes, they've always been wrong. But at least there was a time when you could understand them, when you could relate to them, when there was something about their wrong-headedness that you could sympathize with and say, yes, it's ridiculous, but they just don't know any better. But today's conservative isn't a case of not knowing any better. It's a case of knowing better and just being plain old malicious. Just plain malicious. It used to be greed and selfishness back in the 80s and 90s that was the conservative virtue. Greed and selfishness. But today, modern conservatives are willing to squander huge amounts of money to hurt people. Because today's conservative doesn't care about greed and selfishness anymore. They approve of these things, but the great conservative virtue of the 21st century is cruelty. Senseless cruelty. Even if it costs them a fortune. As long as they're hurting somebody, that's the thing that matters. Cruelty. Oh, and hate. Gotta remember the hate. Cruelty and hate are the virtues of the modern conservative in the 21st century. Senseless cruelty, mindless hate. You're right, there is no possible way that I can relate to these people or understand them or have any sympathy for them when their lives revolve around cruelty and hate and nothing else. Just cruelty and hate. The hatred demonstrated by today's conservative is not the justifiable hatred of "they did this to us, therefore." It is rather the "they exist, therefore." The hatred of people simply because they exist, and no better reason than that. This is the hatred that drives modern conservatism. And the cruelty costs them more money than they would otherwise spend if they just left people alone. Today's conservative spends more money venting hatred and cruelty than he could ever possibly hope to save by doing so. It's a very disturbing thought. And it shows today's conservative to be neither sane nor rational, nor indeed even all that particularly concerned with their own personal well-being, since in many cases they actually harm themselves in order to be able to harm others. This is the very epitome of batshit crazy. Realistically, that kind of malicious hatred shouldn't even exist. And yet, in the mind of the modern conservative, it brews and simmers and bubbles and overflows. These are people who would, both literally and metaphorically, burn down their own home just to ruin their neighbor's garden party. I want you to think about that. People who will burn down their own house to ruin their neighbor's garden party. This is the kind of mindset that exists within modern conservatism. They're not conservatives. They're not conserving anything. They're just plain old reactionaries. And batshit crazy reactionaries at that. They're not conserving anything.